for a 3-day pause to Netanyahu?
You know, I've been asking for a pause for a lot more than 3 days.
To be clear, House Democrats are not going to pay a single right-wing ransom demand.
I believe in my heart of hearts that I've accomplished what I set out to do for West Virginia. I've made one of the toughest decisions of my life and decided that I will not be running for re-election.
A lot of news. Hello, I'm Robert Kofstadt in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. The White House now says Israel has agreed to a daily 4-hour humanitarian pause in fighting in northern Gaza. The Israelis told the U.S. the timing will be announced 3 hours before the pauses begin each day. The reprieves are meant to allow people to move to the south of the territory and obtain food and medicine. That's according to an Israeli official. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now. Weijia, thank you for being here. Tell us more about the president's push for a pause.
Bob, it's always great to see you. President Biden himself said today that he was very frank about the timing here and said that he wished Prime Minister Netanyahu would have acted a little bit sooner. We know through our reporting that he has been pressing Netanyahu to have more humanitarian pauses. And the wording here really matters because they're very clear to say this is not a ceasefire, which, of course, the international community continues to pressure Israel to do. But instead, this will be every day, a period of 4 hours a day where Israeli military operations will pause so that aid can come in and people can get out. And so the administration is still viewing this as progress, as something substantive, because even though it wasn't for 3 days straight, or as we just heard from the president, even longer than that, it does allow for more time for these this movement to happen, which of course they've been saying is really critical.
Weijia, let's listen to what President Biden had to say to reporters about all of this.
Did you ask for a 3-day pause to Netanyahu?
You know, I've been asking for a pause for a lot more than 3 days. Yes.
Did you ask him to pause for 3 days to get the hostages out for that
Yes.
length of time?
I've asked for even a longer pause for some of them.
Weijia, you have reported for so long on President Biden. Give us your repertorial assessment of that moment with reporters. A little chuckle, the aside about Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli leader. What do you make of all of it?
Robert, this has been very tough for President Biden to try to thread a needle to show that, yes, the U.S. stands staunchly next to Israel and will continue to provide the support, whatever they need to get this done. On the other hand, he is under a lot of fire, not only from people in his own party, especially progressives, but really from the world, as I said before, including most nations in the United Nations that all voted for a ceasefire for humanitarian purposes. Now, to be clear, a ceasefire would be a truce, would be an end to fighting altogether. And the president said very definitively again today he does not support that. So he's trying to thread this needle. He's trying to show the support for Israel, but also show that he is trying to find ways for humanitarian support. He continues to pressure every day Israel to manage civilian casualties and deaths to the best of its ability. And so this is a fine line. And, you know, it's tough to see how it plays out because we don't, of course, know how this is going to end.
Final thing here, Weijia, turning to the domestic front. For a moment today, I thought I was seeing footage of Mr. Rogers. We saw the president in an unusual piece of garb, a red sweater, it looked like. Tell us about why he was wearing that particular garment, and he was with union leaders and union members. What was going on today with President Biden and him really trying to show solidarity with that key constituency?
Yeah, we don't see him often in athleisure, but today he was wearing a red T-shirt quite proudly. You see here that a UAW worker gave him because he was there in Illinois to celebrate the reopening of a Stellantis plant after the UAW reached a tentative agreement with big auto manufacturers, and I say tentative because the workers have to still vote on it, but there are no indications that that's not going to happen, and it's just a technical step, because this is all part of the president's sell to Americans, that he is doing everything he can to fight for workers, to chip away at the economy, to bring in more jobs. And so this was really important for him, Bob, as you know, not only to talk about the plant, but to gain support of union workers regardless of what industry they are in. So that's why he was there. First he was at the picket line, now he's wearing a T-shirt. And as you know, he has been self-proclaimed the most ardent supporter of unions when it comes to any president.
We'll see if all those union members show up for him in 2024. Wee Jiang, thank you.
Thanks.
Republican lawmakers are divided as a deadline to avoid a government shutdown looms. They have until next Friday to pass spending bills to keep the government running. But House Speaker Mike Johnson has yet to announce a plan to get this done. He has previously said Republicans do not want to close down the government. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us. Nicole, thanks for being here. What's the latest on whether the government's going to be shut down or not?
Well, I wish I had an answer for you, Bob, but the short answer is we still don't know. Obviously, Speaker Johnson has made clear that he wants to act with urgency here. He spent the better part of the week really conferring with fellow Republican lawmakers on a path forward, whether that is doing some kind of straight CR or continuing resolution that would extend government funding through early next year. But then there's also talk of this potential laddered CR, one in which it would kind of occur more so on a staggered or rolling basis in terms of extending government funding by agency based on some of the appropriations bills that have been passed. I did talk to some House Republicans about which approach they favor. Take a listen.
I'm good with both, but I do like the idea of the...
If you had to pick one.
I'd go with the latter, only because we have some appropriations done. Let's send that over to the Senate. Let's send the CR out on the appropes that we didn't get through, and at least we're making progress, and we're putting more of a sense of urgency to it.
Whatever we do, I don't think anybody in the Republican Party truly wants to shut down the government. Now, of course, if it comes to that point, the media is going to blame the Republican Party for shutting down the government, because you do every single damn time the government gets shut down.
So, right now there really doesn't seem to be a consensus based on, which Republican you talk to for which approach or strategy to take. I also talked to Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries earlier today during his weekly press conference and asked him about whether Democrats would be open to considering this idea. He says that it is a non-starter for Democrats. They simply want a clean CR. But as you know, Bob, it's unlikely that Republicans, at least in the House, will take that course of action, so it remains to be seen.
Nicole, let's listen to Senator Joe Manchin in his announcement today to not seek re-election.
I will not be running for re-election to the United States Senate. But what I will be doing is traveling the country and speaking out to see if there is an interest in creating a movement to mobilize the middle and bring Americans together.
Nicole, we're going to get to a little bit more of the political analysis on all of the Manchin fallout later in the show, but what's your reporting on Capitol Hill? He's talking about mobilizing the middle. Do people in the Democratic Party on the Hill believe he's essentially running for president, just hasn't announced?
Well, I think it remains to be seen. We did see a statement earlier this afternoon from No Labels, which has kind of been pushing this idea potentially of a unity presidential ticket. And they said that they will have a decision to make on that at some point early next year. But those close to the senator say that they shouldn't, people shouldn't read too much into this notion that he may want to travel the country and talk to people. I mean, I think broadly speaking, in terms of senators here on the Hill, they do see this as a loss. They see Joe Manchin as a good faith partner, someone who has been able to work across the aisle. And so from that standpoint, many senators were disappointed, but certainly grateful for Senator Manchin's service.
Nicole Killian, thank you.
You bet.
We'll take a deeper look at Senator Manchin's decision to not seek re-election after the break, as we discuss. But for now, you're streaming America Decides.
I know our country isn't as divided as Washington wants us to believe. We share common values of family, freedom, democracy, dignity, and a belief that together we can overcome any challenge.
Welcome back to America Decides. We are following West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin's decision to not seek another term. David M. Drucker and Leanne Caldwell joined us now. David is a senior writer at The Dispatch. Leanne is a Washington Post live anchor and co-author of the Early 202 newsletter. Great to have both of you here. Leanne, let's begin with you. What's the reaction on Capitol Hill to Senator Manchin, especially among Democrats who are worried about his possible entry into the 2024 presidential race?
Well, Bob, the timing of his video and his announcement happened, as you know, the rhythms on Capitol Hill quite well. Minutes after the vote, the final vote of the week closed, senators had already left town. So we haven't gotten a lot of senator reaction yet. But I do know, talking to sources, that Republicans are absolutely thrilled. Republican aides, people who work on campaigns, they think this is absolutely an easy pickup for Republicans. Now, Democrats are beside themselves. They wanted Joe Manchin to run again. They know that Manchin was their best shot at keeping West Virginia, even though it was going to be an uphill battle for him. And it's interesting to see the Democratic Senate campaign operation now starting to talk about maybe Texas as a pickup for them, because West Virginia was key for them to keeping the Senate. And so it really blew things up for Democrats up here.
David, let's turn to the implications for the 2024 presidential race. You have covered it so closely. I love your book, In Trump's Shadow. This is happening in the shadow of both President Trump and President Biden. The former president and President Biden could be complicated if they're the nominees by having a late entry by Joe Manchin, whether it's as an independent or as a no labels candidate. How do you see this potentially scrambling the race?
Right. So he's been talked about the most in terms of a 2024 campaign as part of a potential unity ticket that the No Labels organization may or may not field. And they put out a statement pretty quick congratulating Joe Manchin for his bipartisan record and talking about what they may or may not be doing. There may be news from No Labels before the week is out in terms of how they plan to handle things going forward. Look, I think that one thing we know is that next year could be extremely volatile in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, with so many unpredictable factors, third-party candidates, other organizations fielding candidates. So it's not just necessarily Biden, Trump, and another, left-leaning candidate or another right-leaning candidate. But we could have multiple presidential candidates. He's obviously RFK Jr., No Labels, the two top of the ticket, Cornel West, somebody else could choose to get in, Biden's being primaried, and we still have a Republican primary going on. So I think that it's very hard to make predictions. What I would say about Joe Manchin running for president is, and I've covered Joe Manchin for years, a very affable politician, a very capable politician, a very interesting guy to cover, often very candid, so it's fun for you and I and everybody else on the Hill. He's 76 years old. We already have a 77-year-old going on 78, and I think Joe Biden's going to be 81 this month. I don't know how fielding another politician in his late 70s gets to the point of why people are so unhappy with the main choices that they have. And that, by the way, is the whole reason No Labels is thinking of fielding a unity ticket, because everybody is so unhappy with this rematch.
Leanne, I'd love to get your reporting and assessment on this. David's right. He's 76, is close in age to some of the other contenders, but it's still younger than President Biden, younger than former President Donald Trump. David brought up Cornel West, an independent, left-leaning, independent candidate. RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., also running now as a left-leaning independent. You have Dean Phillips, the Minnesota Democratic congressman, running in the Democratic primary. No Labels, as David said, hovering out there. What are your Democratic sources saying about what they're going to do to try to keep Senator Manchin from jumping in the 2024 presidential race and further complicating everything for President Biden?
Well, what they were trying to do is convince him to run for Senate again, and that obviously backfired. I reported a few months ago that there was a lot of tension, actually, between Manchin and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Manchin wanted Schumer to spend money in West Virginia to boost Manchin's polls there. Schumer didn't want to spend any money yet while he's defending a whole host of other Senate races until Manchin committed to running again. So they were at a loggerheads. And so despite the fact that most Democrats that I spoke to in the campaign realm and on Capitol Hill were pretty confident that Manchin was going to run for Senate, that obviously didn't happen. What I do know is that there are people who are like-minded, middle-of-the-road, some Democrats, some Republicans, who are in Manchin's ear, including on Capitol Hill, telling him that he should run, that is what the country needs, that they need something different than this rematch. And so what Joe Manchin's video was, just now announcing that he wasn't running for re-election, that was not a video of, I'm going to go home and hang out in West Virginia. I miss West Virginia. I'm out by the creek throwing rocks into the water and spending time with his people. That was a very presidential-looking video with American flags behind him. He was in a very well-appointed suit and tie. Looks like he got a haircut for this video. And so I think that we have something that could really complicate and make very interesting a presidential race that we thought was going to be quite predictable.
I'm going to have to be careful, Leanne. Next time I get a haircut, you're going to start thinking I'm thinking about jumping into the presidential race on the CBS News ticket. That's not happening.
Your hair's always great.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Final thoughts here quickly from David, then Leanne. Senator Joe Manchin, if he runs on a no-label ticket, where could that actually play on the map?
Well, no labels plans to play in non-traditional states, not your typical battleground states, some of them. One of the reasons they plan to hold their convention in April of 2024 in Dallas is because Texas is a key battleground on their map. And so you'll see them, if they're able to field a unity ticket with viable candidates that people actually want to vote for. You know, remember, Bob, right, people don't just vote for the idea of bipartisanship. They vote for ideas and movements and candidates. So let's see who they field. But you can look them to contest states that the traditional candidates don't normally pay attention to.
Leanne, any final thoughts? Quickly.
No, I think this is just going to be fascinating. I think people are sick of the rematch, and this could really, we'll see if people think that this is going to give Trump the election, but people who are talking to Joe Manchin think that that's not necessarily the case.
David M. Drucker and Leanne Caldwell, thank you so much. We've now had 3 Republican debates and more to go. The field, though, is possibly shrinking. Some have already dropped out. But what's changing? What's going to happen? We'll take stock of everything in the 2024 race coming up next. But now you're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Last night, yet again, former President Trump was missing from the Republican debate stage. Instead of sparring with his rivals, he held a rally mere miles away. CBS News political director Finn Gomez joins us now. Finn, let's begin, though, with a clip from CBS News contributor Enrique Acevedo. He interviewed former President Trump this week for Univision.
This week, you were in New York in court. Today, you're facing 4 indictments in multiple jurisdictions. Are you concerned that you might win the Republican nomination only to be forced to drop out of the race?
Well, I don't think you drop out. I think the people know it's a political persecution. It's a political hoax. This is Biden, who's the worst president in the history of our country. We've never had a president so dumb, so incompetent, and so corrupt.
Finn, that's from Univision, the latest conversation with former President Trump. He wasn't on the debate stage. What do you make of his rally that unfolded as the debate took place?
Another example of his counter-programming, another example of him and his team believing that he doesn't need to debate the rest of the Republican field because he's so far ahead. And the fact that it was just a few miles away, frankly, 30 minutes away in Hialeah, Florida, it was 2 things. One, to tweak Ron DeSantis because it's in his backyard. And another thing is that he saw they've been talking about this within the internally about his numbers with like Latino voters. You know, you saw some of those polls from earlier in the week. It's something they want to tout. They think there's some support erosion, if you will, from the Biden folk. These voters switching sides, and he wants to highlight that.
The presidential race is at such a fluid moment right now. We just talked with David M. Drucker and Leanne Caldwell about how Senator Joe Manchin might run no labels. You got Cornel West, independent. RFK Jr., independent. Who else might jump in? Dean Phillips just jumped in. No one thought he was going to run. Now he's in the race for the Democratic nomination. As political director of CBS News, how do you map it all out, all of these different threads that are spooling around the country, politically speaking?
I think we could see something like potentially like 1992, when there's like a Ross Perot type figure, maybe multiple folks coming
multiple Perots?
Yeah, multiple Perots. This might be a multiple Perot like cycle.
In the sense of a year of an outsider ethic.
Because of the collective dissatisfaction that we have seen for both, this hypothetical matchup happening again, this rematch happening again that we saw in 2020. And that's what No Labels has talked about. If they see a rematch, they likely will put out a ticket, essentially, from the center, they say. And Joe Manchin, Larry Hogan, the former governor of the Republican governor of Maryland, could possibly be on that ticket. I mean, I think you could see that.
You could, for sure. 1992 is a fascinating thing to look back on because Pat Buchanan runs against George H.W. Bush in the Republican primary, hurts Bush.
Right.
You have Ross Perot running, drops out, comes back into the race. If Joe Manchin gets in, if the West Virginia senator gets in and run, let's say No Labels, as the top of the No Labels ticket, so many Democrats are alarmed today that would pull from President Biden. Mm-hmm. But that's an assumption. And as you know, we've discussed many times here, my motto is assume nothing.
Right.
And if former President Trump's convicted next year, maybe Manchin provides an option for centrist Republicans who don't love the idea of voting for someone who's facing prison time. So how do you see whether an independent candidate, whether it's Cornel West, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Senator Joe Manchin, if he gets in, do they pull necessarily from just President Biden? Or when you're talking to your Trump sources, you're well-sourced there, are they worried, for example, not just about Senator Manchin, but maybe about Kennedy and how his position on vaccines could pull some Republican voters in?
I would argue I'm well sourced with the Biden camp too. I mean, they do believe that Dean Phillips.
I believe you broke the news of the Biden campaign manager. Let it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I do think that.
Let it be known.
Let it be known.
I was just making a point
like
about the Trump sources.
I'm gonna put an exclamation point on that now.
He's well sourced across the board.
As are you. But they believe the Biden camp do believe that the No Labels potential ticket.
If it happens.
If it's like a Manchin-Hogan thing, they do think that you could see something that we saw in Arizona during the midterms, right?
But are the Trump people alarmed about Kennedy?
RFK Jr., yes.
They are?
They are.
So what are they going to do about it?
But well, I mean, you've already seen that they are doing some back channeling. It's kind of this back channeling against a potential RFK Jr. candidacy. You've seen some of that. Some of the Trump supporters on X, on social media platforms, already coming out and criticizing RFK Jr. for some of his some of the statements that he said previously, very like progressive statements that he said. There was a Q poll, Quinnipiac poll that we saw recently that showed that he could pull some support from a potential. From Trump, potentially. And also, but at the same time, if Manchin polls, let's say Manchin, like we're speaking hypothetically here, but if Manchin polls support from Biden, from that center, soft partisans, but also, I mean, we could see multiple Perots. Right?
Multiple Perots. We'll end it there. Finn Gomez, thank you so much. That does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.